This is the Matt Mosley Show.
It is the Matt Mosley Show, E-Radio Network. Trey Wingo joining us now. You saw him for many years. He anchored the ESPN's coverage of the NFL draft and used to do the second couple of days, then became the front man and did the whole thing. And it was, Trey, you were great at it. You did it a lot of years. And I know you still love the draft. Now you don't have to put in however many, I guess you probably prepared for that 2 or 3 months. How are you, sir? I know you come to us in the land of Hawaii, and a place that you and your family have loved over the years. But thank you for getting up early and being on the Mosley Show. Means a lot to me.
Oh, Matt, anytime, brother. How are you?
Doing fine. And we're just, just seeing what excitement Jerry will cause today as Jerry Jones will get ready to pick at number 12 in just a little bit under 2 hours from now. But Trey, are you the habits that you formed over all those years of draft coverage, do you still find yourself digging in and wanting to know, or once you stopped anchoring, were you able to kind of immediately let some of it go? Because I would imagine to have and I know you had a staff, but still you had to put in a ton of research. Do you still love the draft? And how do you take it in now? Do you still try to watch a lot of it, or can you just try to watch a little bit of it?
Yeah, look, the draft is the ultimate reality TV show, was the line that I always use. No one knows what's going to happen. There's no script. You know how much money you could have made if you in 2016 said, hey, I'm going to put some money that the best offensive lineman in the draft, right before he gets drafted, there's going to be a video leak of him smoking weed out of a World War II gas mask. That doesn't happen. You can't prepare for that kind of stuff. Or one year the Vikings had to pass because they didn't get their pick in on time. They almost did it 2 years in a row. I mean, it was insane, So there's this element of just understanding what the draft is that I think is the most important thing. It's absurdly good theater more than anything else. And I know that they're, the football heads like Mel and back in the day Todd and now to some degree Lewis and Daniel Jeremiah, who does a great job with the NFL Network. I mean, they put in the work to really evaluate these players. And I never wanted to be considered a player evaluator because there were people that were much smarter and better at that than me. My approach was, when I did the draft, was people seem to look at the draft as our draftees as products, right? We need a tight end. Well, insert this tight end to replace that tight end. Like they're widgets or they're pieces of machinery. But in the end of the day, they're not. They're people. They're young men, very young men. And you never know what you're going to get. I mean, to me, the two most hilarious things that in football that I covered were people evaluating high school recruiting classes going into college and then translating that 4 or 3 years later into what that's going to be at the NFL level. Because if it were that simple and were that easy, we wouldn't get it wrong all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, a good friend of mine, Paul Hembekides at ESPN, he does a great job there still. They did a comprehensive study over a 20-year period from 2000 to 2019 on just first-round picks, let alone second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever, just first-round picks. And the litmus test they used was if the team that drafted this player in the first round signed him to a second contract, then it was a good pick. And, for example, I think there were 54 quarterbacks taken in the first round between 2000 and 2019. Less than half of them got a second contract from the team that drafted them. And now that's not always, for example, like on the player. Like, for example, Baker Mayfield is now on Team 4, number 1 pick in 2018, and he's found a home. He's found a rhythm. It didn't work in Cleveland. Carolina was a stopgap. Then he went to the Rams and had 1 or 2 amazing games. And then since he's gone to Tampa, he's sort of settled in. but it didn't work for a lot of teams. At one point, Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield were on the same team, the Carolina Panthers, and they were 1-3 in the 2018 draft. And it's a crapshoot, and I do. It drives me crazy when people say, "Well, these are the top players in the draft. These are by far the best ones." You don't know that. You believe that that's the case. You think their skill set will translate. There's a million different things that could derail that person from being what you think he's going to be. So you have to go into it sort of open-minded and try and find the humanity in these individuals and understand that the humanity of it is the one thing you can't control, which is why a lot of times it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and man, the stories that y'all would present, and now, of course, ESPN, because I guess, they can't have enough, so there's like all these simulcasts and everything. But, man, that 1 year, for instance, you know what I'm talking about. It was just like it just seemed like every other pick, there was some sort of tragedy attached to it. And I know as a host, you got to kind of have to watch that because it's like you don't want to turn it into like a sad cry fest, but also these are remarkable stories, and everybody has their own thing. So anyway, you were incredibly smooth at that, and so I don't know. I think you have to work hard at it to make it look that natural. But I miss seeing you do it, and I would watch a draft where you just walked around Maui, just recording yourself on the phone, which is kind of what you did in reacting to a Jerry Jones story. Or actually, the other day you were basically saying "buyer beware." I think you used the Latin phrase "caveat emptor." But anyway, all that is kind of amazing to just the whole thing. Now, what do you think about what the NFL did? And this is while you were still doing it. We used to be at Radio City Music Hall. You and I would both be there. I would be down there in those extremely uncomfortable seats. You would be kind of up with the high and mighty with TV, and I would wave at you and Keyshawn up there. And, of course, that's all we kind of knew, and so I loved it. I loved going to New York City. I thought that was kind of fun. I didn't know what it would be like when they sort of took it on the road. It's taken on a life of its own, and some of these scenes have been quite remarkable. I think of Philly. I think of Chicago. I think of Kansas City. I'm sure it'll look very cool tonight. I can't imagine it being quite the crowd that we've seen in these other places. But how do you feel like that has done for the NFL? How it translates, and do you find that that's even elevated the draft in a lot of ways?
Oh, it absolutely has. I remember sitting next to Roger, and we always did an interview with the commissioner. The night of the draft, and we had it in our pre-draft special. And I remember sitting outside the Philadelphia Art Museum in 2017, and there's 100,000 people milling around outside. And side note, we all got a contact high. None of us would have passed a drug test with everything that was floating around in the city that day. But Roger looked at me and said, "Trey, I do believe we've outgrown an indoor draft ever." And that's exactly what happened. It just became a thing. It's become a spectacle. The NFL is really good at two things: making money and keeping our attention. And that's what the draft has become. I mean, I remember when they thought about moving into primetime, I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. They're going to go up against primetime programming. It's going to get crushed. It crushed the competition. It wasn't even close. It's been a remarkable thing, and they're never going back to, just having it in one place on a Saturday afternoon. It used to be a Saturday, Sunday thing, and now it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it's really smart. They're really brilliant about it. I mean, when the draft was in Dallas in 2018 and I was staying at the hotel, I ran into these guys in the lobby, and they had come to the draft from Scotland. And I said, well, why did you come to the draft from Scotland? Why didn't you go to a Super Bowl or something like that? And what they said was really interesting. First of all, it's impossible to get Super Bowl tickets. We all know that. Secondly, he said, if you go to the Super Bowl, and he did it in his thick Scottish accent, if you go to the Super Bowl, there's really only fans of two teams there. And it's really just about these two teams and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. But when you go to the draft, you're around fans of all 32 teams, and it's this communal experience where even though we didn't win the playoff game or didn't get into the postseason or had a losing record, we believe that the draft is where it all can turn around for us. And we can figure out that this player is going to be the thing that takes us where we want to go. And it became a much more communal sort of event for 32 fan bases instead of 2. And I think that's the thing that the NFL tapped into when they changed the model of how the draft was going to be. And it's turned out to be a brilliant thing for them. And now we have every year cities vying and competing with each other to hold the draft, which means that's more money that the NFL can make.
You know, and Trey Wingo's on as longtime host for ESPN of the NFL draft and pretty much everything else over the years. Did Sports Center, the women's Final Four, which that's another thing, Trey, you kind of helped. And, of course, UConn and Gino helped as well. But you kind of helped elevate that coverage over the years, and now it's kind of wild to see how the women generate huge ratings, and we see it more and more. You know, the WNBA hopefully will grow and get better, but the real money is to be made by staying in college, and that's
Correct.
where the college game is still way bigger than any kind of professional women's league kind of thing. But and by the way, I really wish you would do the rest of the interview in that Scottish brogue you rolled out there. But anyway, it is Trey Wingo, and Trey,
If that's what you want, I'm happy to do it live.
You talk about the contact high you got. I wonder, did you ever have some contact high there with the Fidelts in Waco, Texas? Or was anything ever floating around there, or did y'all stay away from that?
I don't know what you're talking about, man.
Trey and I did attend the same university back in the day, a little bit apart, but we did, and both share a love for Baylor. I think that your love ebbs and flows a little bit more than mine does, but that's okay. The Jerry thing the other day that I saw you kind of react to on Twitter was Jerry saying, and I kind of laughed too, because I was like, okay, this is just the thing about the spectacle, and hey, look over here, Jerry's really good at it. He's a ringmaster. As Larry Lacewell once said when he brought in T.O., he said if it helped sell tickets, he would bring in Charlie Manson. All right. Lacewell actually said that, the late, great Lacewell, to me after he brought in T.O. But Jerry says, I love the headline, Cowboys having pretty substantive trade talks, which any owner or any team could just throw that out, like we're open or, we're taking calls. But it's that's Jerry. And again, you've heard that over the years. You became a Cowboys fan at what point in your life? Was it when you went to school in Texas, or was it even before that?
Way before that. My whole family's from Texas. My dad's from San Antonio. My mom's from Texarkana. And we lived overseas for a few years. And when I came back, the first football game I ever saw was a Monday Night Football game between the Cowboys and the then Arizona Cardinals, or St. Louis Cardinals, excuse me. And then my dad was like, yeah, they're from Texas. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that'll be my team then. And that's sort of how that began. But the Jerry thing, look, it's lying season right now. I mean, from the start of the combine to the draft, it's lying season in the NFL. You can't believe anything that anybody says because they all have an agenda. There are two agendas leading up to the draft. Teams are trying to devalue players so they can get them maybe at a lower pick than they thought they might go at. Players are trying to elevate their value. So you have these competing agendas where players are doing everything they can to make their stock as high as possible. And teams are trying to, on some levels, devalue players. So maybe somebody will say, yeah, maybe we don't want that guy. And then they'll be able to get the guy that they wanted anyway. So there's all these sort of false flag operations that go on out there, and you just have to read through the BS. And so I don't know what the hell Jerry's talking about when he says, we've had pretty substantive trade talks. With who? For what? And they'll never say.
No.
They won't say that because, A, if there is something, they don't want to ruin it, and B, they kind of just want to generate some interest to see if anybody will take a nibble. You read all these columns of the last few days from all the insiders, and you hear this team is willing to trade up to get their player if he's available, and these guys are looking to move back because the player they want may not be. And like, you could say that every year, right? You could say that every year about every draft. So this year specifically, when you look at this draft, I think the most real thing you can say is it's not great. There's not a ton of top-tier talent out there. Now, there's some good offensive linemen. There's maybe, I would say there's maybe 10 bona fide first-round picks. But there are 32 of them going to be picked. Right? That's the way it is. Not every year do you get, 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks like we had last year. And most of them look like they're going to be okay. We still don't know about the kid out of Michigan because he hasn't been able to get on the field. But there are going to be a lot of years where there's going to be a lot of picks taken in the first round that probably don't have first-round talent. And I think that's what we're seeing this year. I can't remember who it was wrote, the intrigue at 2, 3, 4, and 5 with the Giants and the Browns and all these other teams. They're looking to see if anybody's going to come up to them to maybe pick up Shadur Sanders or Hunter out of Colorado. Well, if he was such a bona fide guaranteed hit, why would teams at 2, 3, 4, and 5 thinking about letting someone else come up and take him, right? So there's a whole bunch of intrigue out there in this year's draft because there's not a lot of great talent. There just isn't. There's some good interior line talent, and there's a couple of guys that really pop, but it's not going to be a year where you can get a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase or some of these guys. Some years we're stock full of them. Other years you're not, and it's just be one of those. It's going to be one of those drafts where it's going to be really important for players to go to the right place and be developed in the right way for them to be successful.
Isn't it interesting that these things go in cycles? We thought the running back, it just didn't have it. It had become devalued. The thought of taking a top 5 pick or top 5 pick on a running back seemed crazy. I mean, the Cowboys did it with Zeke Elliott. It paid off for a few years. I would say him holding out and then breaking. I think the second contract obviously did not work out, but here we are.
Destroyed the franchise.
Exactly.
The second Zeke contract destroyed Dallas's franchise, and this is the problem that they face now because they paid the running back before the quarterback, right? Which is what they did. That set everything in motion for the Cowboys to sort of have to have this hard reboot. That's why Amari Cooper had to leave because they couldn't afford to pay him, even though Dak and Amari had amazing chemistry together. They couldn't find it work. They couldn't make it work. The best teams in the NFL get their players signed before somebody sets the market. Like, that's the reality of it, okay? Myles Garrett has set the market, $40 million. Well, if the Cowboys had really tried to get something done with Micah Parsons before then, they wouldn't have to look at a $40 million a year deal. The Bengals, even though they paid Higgins and they paid Chase and all this kind of stuff, if they had gotten those guys signed early before these other contracts were taken, they could have taken care of them and had a few more years to really have some money to spend to build around these guys. So the best teams in the NFL don't react to somebody else setting the market at a position for what the price is. They make sure they get their top players in before somebody else sets the market. And that's the biggest problem the Cowboys have had.
And that's why we knew when Mahomes signed that deal, even though it was this unprecedented 10-year deal, it was a fixed amount for 10 years.
Extremely team-friendly.
Yes. And it felt strange to say that when it was, $45 a year. But now you got Dak, who has not even close to the accomplishment of Mahomes, making $15 million more per season.
Yeah.
Per season.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is wild. Talking to Trey Wingo on the Matt Mosley Show, E-Radio Network. And you brought up Shadur. Every year there's somebody that's like the most polarizing story, right? Yeah. I mean, even the Vince Young thing was kind of polarizing because he'd been great at Texas. The Wonderlic thing happened. There was a lot of stuff sort of swirling. What kind of quarterback was he going to be? What would the fit be? But every year there's some kind of one sort of fascinating breakout personality. Now, Travis Hunter, but because of the very nature of him playing two positions, that's an exciting, interesting one. But Shadur is very volatile in this draft. And he's the one guy now we're seeing, could he slip to 21? Could he go at 9? He's kind of, because of the desperation for quarterback, these guys could go earlier. They could, though, slide down. But, the thing, and I thought you'd be great to react to this. I have to laugh when people, sort of these unnamed sources, anonymous sources, somebody, I think Pelissero went and talked to somebody, right? A longtime assistant. And they say, this guy's arrogant, or this guy makes us feel small, or this guy, and it's just like, wait, have you met his dad? Did y'all think this guy was going to walk in hat in hand, like real, some kind of like the shy retiring type? So anyway, some of that stuff is a little over the top, but I do find him, Trey, to be maybe the most interesting part of this draft because it does seem kind of volatile. He could kind of go anywhere, including could he even slip into the second round? I don't see it, but I wouldn't completely dismiss the possibility.
Well, the desperation for quarterbacks is very similar to this year's draft. We have 32 teams that have to start a quarterback, and there's probably 12, 13, 14 really worthy starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So you're right. The players are always going to be overdrafted. Just the quarterback position especially. A couple of things of what you just said. Real quickly, I got to tell this great Vince Young story. Before he was drafted in 2006, we did a pre-draft interview with him one day up at Bristol over satellite. And I just said to him, I said, Vince, one of the knocks against you that people are concerned about is that, you're going to have to take a lot of snaps under center. And, 98% of your snaps at Texas were in shotgun. What do you say to that? And I'll never forget his response. He said, well, basically it's the same thing. And I was like, man, this guy doesn't know what he doesn't know. And that is a huge red flag. And I remembered that all these years later. I'm like, nah, that's not how that works, bro. That's not it. As far as the arrogant thing for Sanders, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Okay. Because you're right. Not only his father, name me a winning quarterback who isn't arrogant. Was Peyton Manning not arrogant? Tom Brady, wasn't he arrogant? Joe Burrow, arrogant? Patrick Mahomes? If you're not arrogant as a quarterback, and I want to be clear, there's arrogance and then there's annoyance, right? Mm-hmm. But all of these guys are so full of themselves because they believe in themselves.
Correct.
And they believe they can get the job done. Now, how you present that to the media is a whole different deal. But if a guy isn't cocky and doesn't believe in himself, why do you want him? Like, why would you want him? Now, the flip side to this, which is really interesting, and Jay Glazer put this out there the other day, which I thought was super interesting. NIL has changed the game for a lot of people because these guys, the top guys, walk into the NFL with a boatload of money to begin with. Now, that's not enough to sustain them for the rest of their lives, and they'll figure that out when taxes and then your career's over, and you're like, wait, where did all the money go? But they walk into this thing with money in the bank already. So you have to sort of I thought this was one of the most interesting things I've heard anybody say leading up to the draft, is that the NIL thing has changed how you really have to evaluate. Because there are people that like being football stars, but how many people really like football players? Because that's a different deal. Johnny Manziel is a great example of that. He loved being a football star. Didn't really love being a player. Didn't really want to put in the work. The documentary where he never opened his iPad once, not one freaking time. So you really need to grind and find the players that really want to play and want to be coached and want to be great at this, not just because Herm Edwards has a great saying. There's two kinds of football players: players that play the game for what it can do for them, or players that play the game for what they can bring to the game. And the latter, I think, especially in the era of NIL, which I'm all for players getting paid. I want to be 100% clear. Mm-hmm. But in the era where they can walk into some of these guys can walk into the NFL with millions in the bank already, you really got to make sure you find guys that are really, really into the game and want to be coached and want to get better, because it's not just about the money. It's about making their mark on the field.
Man, well said. Last thing I wanted to ask you, for people like me that still love to kind of see what you're up to and what you're doing, I noticed Wondery, that's the huge podcasting platform.
Yeah.
You've also, the folks out of Vegas, I know, have featured you a lot over the last few years, but where can people, if they want to still hear from you, in fact, after you left ESPN, you were doing some great interviews for a while, because I really enjoyed some of those. Where can we still experience Trey Wingo?
It's a great question. And we're going to take some time and figure that out. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads. But, I'm going to be doing some golf for NBC this summer, U.S. Open, British Open, and the Ryder Cup. And we'll figure the rest of it out. I'm in no real rush to get back in there and without finding a situation that works for me. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I loved what you said about McIlroy. I do think sometimes we get captured by, recency or the moment, but that did feel huge. And I know you've always loved playing golf, love the game, and so that's really cool to do stuff with NBC. And in fact, Damon Hack's a great friend of mine that works with NBC, and man, they would be very fortunate to have you as part of that. But Trey, appreciate it. Happy draft day to you. You've been very instrumental in my career, and I appreciate that. Appreciate your friendship, and thank you for getting up early to do this with me on draft day.
You got it, Matt. Anytime, buddy. All
right, there he goes. Trey Wingo, longtime friend and longtime ESPN personality, SportsCenter host. Has done pretty much everything there, but really became a huge part of the draft coverage as he anchored it for, I don't know, going on 10, 15 years, it seemed like, but did an incredible job there. All right, we'll get a little baseball to finish off the show with as we continue to get you ready for the NFL Draft. That's next.
More Matt Mosley coming up.